welcome to your Innovation, Technology, and General Services Committee. I am joined by my colleagues, Councilman Mike Bonin, Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell, and we've got, as always, got an interesting agenda, 3 items, but a couple of them have multiple parts. So, Mr. Villanueva, are there any general public comment cards?
None, sir.
Okay. Then we will move, thank you, we will move to the first item. Mr. Renneker, would you please come to the table? And this is a discussion item, so we're not voting on it, but we've got 10 different pieces to this item.
So passing around the top 10.
You could do it straight up, or you could do it Letterman style, start from the reverse,
Letterman
however
style,
you want,
right.
whatever.
I'll start with number 1. We'll work our way down. On the Windows 7 update, we're at 54%. We still have 11,000 desktops to go. Departments are extremely busy in the remediation effort. If we complete about 5% per week now, which appears to be on target, we'll be in good shape. So right now everything's on target, and we're working to remediate them as fast as we can. On the Open Data Initiative,
Maybe as we go through each one, we'll do questions on each one if we have.
That sounds good.
Because otherwise, I think we'll get lost in it all. But on this one, the first one that you said we're moving pretty well, but the CAO, the report with them, is that pending? Is that what you said?
there are 2 departments that went to Budget and Finance Committee. Right. So we have Fire and Animal Services that have some funding constraints, and CAO is working with them to try to get past those issues so that they're in compliance by April 8th.
Okay. Number 2.
On the Open Data Initiative, we have spent about 90 minutes with the IT Policy Committee in educating them on a new policy that came out around this on how they're to provide data sets. So we have the Controller's Office with Control Panel that has financial and payroll data. The Mayor's Office is working with all the departments that identify data sets that they have available, and that the appropriate types of data are included or excluded depending on what meets the policy. And so the Mayor's Office is aggressively working to get this up and running, I would guess in around a March time frame, and there'll be more coming on around that. But right now the effort's looking very good and very exciting, and excited to start communicating that out to the public soon.
It's a great. What's the biggest challenge with this one, you think?
It's just working with the departments because they don't have additional resources, so they're identifying the resources they have to go out and identify the data sources and be able to load those up into the tool that we've chosen, which is Socrata. And that effort's coming along nicely. I think we have a little over 120 data sets loaded and more being added every single day.
We did in my district with the controller, we did a Control Panel LA Open Data community meeting, and a lot of folks came out to it. It was more people than I expected. There's a lot of interest around this, and it's going to be great. The hard part, of course, is going to be, especially at the beginning, when people take small sets of data and make interpretations that may not fit, but we'd rather have more data, solve those problems with more data than less. So it's a great initiative.
And the nice thing about the tool that's chosen, it'll have built-in analytic capabilities in it. So it's just not a matter of having a data set and trying to figure out what to do with it. So there'll be some viewing tools that come along with it as well. So it'll be nice. On the number 3, the Avasant Strategic Technology Services effort, the strategic advisor has completed all of the financial gathering from all the departments. We've also started to meet with a few other cities to try to benchmark ourselves against them. We've met with Philadelphia and Dallas to compare our IT spend as well as our structure and efficiencies and some recommendations that can be made there. We're looking to go to the IT Oversight Committee with some recommendations probably within the next 30 to 60 days. An executive committee has already reviewed various scenarios that are likely for consideration and have been given feedback, so there'll be more to come on that soon.
And this one is another one that sort of, it looks like a small item, but that's a huge transformation potentially.
Absolutely.
As it comes down the pike, which is why you have it highlighted on your list, but it's
right.
It's important that we sort of keep track of these as we go.
And one that we've also elevated up is number 4, the AVL Project for Fire. It's one of their key initiatives. ITA has reached out to our hiring hall to get additional resources to assist fire under their leadership, so they're taking the project management role on it. We've completed, with their help, about 420 out of the 594 vehicles so far, so the project's coming along nicely.
So 420 already have the
AVL installed, correct.
And does this does it go both ways in the sense that you can send information to the fire truck in terms of where they need to go and GPS coordinates of, and it's sending the information of where the fire engine is back to the dispatch.
Right.
But in terms of the fire engine themselves, what kind of information are they going to get from this?
So initially, the first phase is only for dispatch, so that they can be more serving the public from the standpoint of what units are closest from a dispatching perspective to reduce response times. But as far as determining navigation capabilities and other applications for that in the vehicle, that's outside the scope of this project.
Okay. I went on a ride-along recently, and we went from one station, leapfrogged 2 others, to do an assist, and I was amazed about it in terms of, they're doing what this is doing, but they're doing it manually and calling it in and deciding that dispatch decides. But I also was struck by the fact that, they know where they're going in their immediate area, but if they get leapfrogged 4 different places away, they may not, they have these maps on the top of their truck. At some point, it'd be great to have this integrated so that the location gets shot right to to them having a GPS. And this may plug into what Mr. Bonin's talking about in terms of the first in stuff, and if it's an iPad or whatever, but it's getting it going back and forth, which should be a lot easier once something like this is in place, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Item number 5, the 301 CRM system. We had our executive committee, which was our first one, where we have talked about next steps, where we are right now. All the staffing for the project has been approved through managed hiring. The hardware and the software components that need to be up front and installed should be ordered by the end of this week, which gives us the whole month of February to get the orders placed, get it installed in February, and then start doing the build in March. We're using the same stoplight type of indicators as we did with the FMS Enterprise Resource Planning System for financials. So green light means we're on track, yellow means there's some level of risk, and red means we're at risk of not being able to meet our October date. We did elevate things to a yellow state only because of the uncertainty of the ordering and getting things installed and configured in February, but we'll be working closely with the vendors to hopefully try to turn it back onto a green light by the end of February. The Cyber Information Command Center meets weekly, and a couple of things, the reason why this will remain on our top 10, we've done a lot of critical elements so far as part of the effort. We have the Racer Division inside LAPD, which is the central point of contact. We've developed a policy around that is going to be approved, I believe, today, and that will be disseminated across all the departments so they know how to do the reporting into it. So our next steps, and the reason why it's on here, is we're going to be taking an inventory of what all the departments have from a procedure standpoint, how they update and patch their systems and their servers. We're going to try to get us all up to a common level. Once that is done, we're going to bring in an independent third party to audit us and do a penetration test across all of our networks, and that includes LADWP, harbor, airports, and then come back with any remediation efforts and start that process. So when that's done, then this project will be complete. But the weekly meetings will continue to go on, and good dissemination between our staff and our federal agencies as regards to sharing what cyber attacks and issues are going wrong in the region. As you know, the RFP for email, it's been out for about 4 months now. We have all the questions, about 500 that have been answered. Because of the nature of the broadband RFP and having a component that is a portion of this, meaning if the city opted to continue going a hosting strategy, then that option might be something that's considered in the broadband RFP. So I'm working closely with the city attorney's office. We've restated the RFP to try to include that component and make it very clear. So as we release the restated RFP and the questions, we hope that the next round of questions will be much minimal. So we expect that to be released probably in the first half of February, and we'll probably leave a question and answer period and responses for about 30 days. So probably a March timeframe for a response on that.
I'm just curious, under that it indicates the status is pending funding, so are things going to get held up unless there's more money?
So we already have a budget for email, calendar, contacts component. The one thing that the city never considered was what's the cost for the Office or apps product. And right now the city continues to use Microsoft Office. And there's also 25 other products under there that are being considered to be a standard. Things like migrating to Active Directory, things like mobile data management for all your mobile devices, antivirus, things like that, that typically were out of scope and were being funded independently by all the departments. We're trying to take a look at a citywide approach to a volume licensing strategy that may be able to help not just email, but 25 core products and initiatives to get the city all the way up to a baseline saying, okay, these are our standards, we're getting the best pricing, and we've come up and adopted some standards there. So there isn't funding for anything outside of email, so it would be one of those things that would come back depending on the pricing. Is that something departments can absorb, or do we need to go back and request funding next fiscal year?
And without that additional piece, would it make the migration to different email unworkable?
It depends on which option we go into. The ITA has submitted a budget package around this item in anticipation that there would be a worst case scenario. So that'll be something that'll be coming forward for reconsideration. On the broadband RFP, the city attorney's office has been out to bid for outside counsel. That effort's been completed. There were 4 responses, and a recommendation will be coming forward to this committee at the next meeting. We're working on the funding aspects of it. We wanted to make sure that you're clearly aware of what the funding sources are to pay for the outside counsel, should it not only complete the effort but even go forward. And we've done so, and so that's being written up, and you'll see that in probably about a week.
As you know, anxious to move that. I feel like that's been the piece that's been slowing down our, the broadband Wi-Fi proposal. So at least that's moving. We're going to have, now when you say you bring it to us next committee, does that mean a decision to ratify at the next meeting?
That's correct.
So the next meeting we can ratify that decision, and then there won't be any technical obstacles anymore to moving forward with the RFP or making the RFP public in terms of the broadband.
I believe outside counsel will probably want to meet with you and ensure that they at least have the chance to review it and make modifications prior to release, but then they also might talk to you about risks versus benefits of letting it go early. So I think they'll want to have that discussion, but I think we'll be in a position to move forward relatively quickly after they come on board, which hopefully will be the first part of February.
We keep pushing this date. But,
and the city attorney is very aware of that, and they're being very expedient about going through the process to make sure it's done quickly.
I appreciate that, and talking to the city attorney, and he's vowed to be very helpful and everything else, so I appreciate their efforts. So thank you.
Another effort that's going on in concert with the strategic advisors, we have engaged with a personnel expert around classification compensation. We're specifically looking at 54 IT classifications that haven't been updated in over 25 years. And I think, as you're all aware, over the next 5 years, at least half of our 1,200 IT employees will be retiring in the city or be eligible for. So as a result of dealing with succession planning, we felt it was critical to ensure that whatever we're recruiting for is really something that's asked for and utilized from outside industry. So as we're benchmarking and comparing ourselves to titles and classification levels for the work that needs to be done in the city, that we at least are at par with our government neighbors as well as private sector. So this effort is to whittle down 54 different classifications into 20 or less, and to make sure that there's different levels within those classifications, such as journey, master, expert levels, and I think this will go a long way. A survey should be coming out for all the employees. About 960 are in scope. They'll each get a survey. It'll take about 35 to 45 minutes to fill out, and that will be the initiation of matching existing positions to new classifications.
So even though we're perfectly matched for the 1980s world, you think we ought to move into the...
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Right.
That makes sense.
Bold statement, Mr. Chair.
And lastly, in this RFP for voice over IP services to replace our aging voice system is really to do a couple of things. It mirrors what we're asking for in our broadband RFP. So what we lack is we want validation for a couple of things in the RFP. The number of facilities that are in scope for fiber attachment, the number of circuits that will be replaced, and also a more accurate inventory of the different voice types and numbers of instrument for each location. So that'll be a validation effort. The intent is to go out to bid and select a standard. So in the broadband RFP, at the end of the day, if the vendor has core competency in that skill set or service, that we'll at least know what our standard or what our ask is, rather than the vendor telling us what we should have or do. So that's the reason for this process. So we got the RFP in draft. This is the bring-in consultant to basically do that inventory and develop the RFP.
That'll help make it clear what we're putting on the table.
That's right.
In terms of city contracts and other things that are part of the overall.
That's correct.
Do either of my colleagues have any questions on any of these that we want to move over? Otherwise, we'll move to the next item. So, thank you. It's great.
Thanks,
update.
Steve.
This is very helpful to us.
Get all the GMs to do this.
So, Mr. Villanueva, would you please read item 2?
Item number 2 is a motion by Council Members Bonin and Buscaino relative to the use of new technology to increase the effectiveness of special event services, along with a review of the city's public way reservation system. This item is also referred to Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee.
Great. And do we have any cards on this item?
We have no public cards on this item, sir.
So we have staff from Transportation, Street Services, LAPD as well available, I assume. Come to the table, and we've got, as we're talking about, several departments have been working together the past few months to provide a more effective service to event organizers, as well as better coordination among city departments performing the work at these events. And what we're going to have now is, we always like to have a little bit of show and tell at these committee hearings, and this is going to be a good one in terms of getting a demonstration on what you've been working on, and then we'll have questions. And I know Mr. Bonnet's his motion will have a number of questions. So please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Selwyn Hollins. I'm the Executive Officer of the Los Angeles Department of Transportation. We have been working on a special event system for the past several months in cooperation and partnership with Street Services. Street Services, as you know, coordinates special events. However, our department is pretty much at every event in the city. So it was a natural opportunity for us to work together. What we're going to show you, just take a few minutes to highlight where we are with the new system we've developed. We're probably about 85% completion. There's a few tweaks that we need to customize for Street Services. We're going to show you 2 components, just highlight some of the features that will be available to the public, and then also features internally that helps us to better coordinate citywide how we schedule and process special events. This first screen actually is after you log into the home page. Someone will log into the special event system. Can you go back to the original? The public will go into, we're going to change the image there. That's just it's working. We'll have something that's more representative of the city. But the public will go to Street Services website, and they're interested in special events. They click a button. This is what they'll see. Along the top bar, we see special events. You have home, my requests, etc. Okay. The system allows you to look up special events that are in your community, as well as to apply for special events. So as I'm talking, I'm going to let Paul. Paul is with the LADOT's Business Solutions Group. He'll just start going through the process. So if someone selects to apply for a new permit, they pretty much follow the same procedures that Street Services currently uses. Okay? There's information there that obviously, go ahead, Paul, just go through it. You select the type of event. Hold on to that a little bit, Paul. As you can see, there's a variety of types of requests that people can ask for. Whether it's a block party, you can get into farmers markets, parades, etc. Okay? They select the one that applies to them. In this case, we're choosing a block party. We actually have a lot of block parties. They simply put in the title of the block party, a date they want to start, a date they want to finish, the address. The address is the anchor point of where the event is. Cross-street locations, descriptions, etc. The process is extremely simple for the user because we're all about user experience. Estimated attendance is very important because that dictates what type of resources need to be at the event. This one-time event, where Paul is doing now, sometimes the requester is different from the person who may pay the bill or the person who's actually the point person for coordinating the event. So we give the opportunity to input that information as well. Okay. Oh, it's within 5 dates of today. So that tells us, hey, this one is right around the corner. That could be problematic sometimes with coordinating among various departments. Okay. Go ahead, Paul. But that happens. All right. So what it does is it populates it on a map for you automatically. We know where the location is. We also have the capability of looking and seeing are there other events in the area. Okay. But for the user, again, we're in the customer service screen. This is what they see. Okay. So go ahead, Paul. And what Paul is doing is you can identify the length of the block that you want to reserve. Okay. So it's a simple, you just draw it. It gets stored there. The system will identify where all the blocks are. Now it's just a matter of Paul putting in the start date and the start time and the end time of the event. Populates the fields. We're good to go. This is where they're asking for full or partial street closures. Then step 3, you get to your final step. And this pretty much is, again, resembles what Street Services currently uses. Some of the particulars of the event that we need to know so they can help decide who's best of all the city departments that should support or review the request. You also have the ability to add documentation. There's a number of things that people add. You can add images, you can add notes, letters, petitions, paperwork. Sometimes paperwork is associated with it, certain permits, etc. Go ahead and submit the request. Now, once the request is submitted, the user now has a log ID. They can go in on their own. They also get automatic notification, and they will continue to get notifications as each step of the process proceeds. Okay. So in this case, he's showing you a summary. This is, for example, if a user went in to look at the status of their request, they will see the details of it and what they requested. On the right side is the stage of where it is. Okay, so it was drafted, submitted, investigator assigned. As the departments, street services, and others start to do different things, it'll start to populate that information for them. So it's all in one spot. Okay. Paul is clicking on event block closures, and if they want to see where their event is, they can also see that too. They can see the map of what they requested and what's being considered. All right, so that pretty much deals with the public side. Really simple, really easy. The internal coordination is what's a little bit more challenging. The current process obviously involves a lot of emails and paperwork, etc. This effort eliminates the majority of that. It also has automatic notification so that people are on timelines and they know that stuff is coming up. Street Services has been doing a great job at chasing people down for information. But the system now prompts the different departments that it's on them to stay on top of it so Street Services can relieve some of that administrative burden of chasing them down. So, what are you in the employee? Oh, yeah, Paul moves pretty fast. Okay, Paul. What Paul is looking at is how it comes into Street Services. Why don't you go ahead and start processing that? Okay. So, in Street Services, they see all of the events. We only have, this is a test bed, so there's only a couple of items here, but they'll see all of the events that are coming in. One of the things they rely on is for departments, after Street Services does this review, is for departments to identify their estimated costs for services. Okay, and that's a challenge because you're dealing with a lot of different departments. In DOT alone, there's 3 different groups that have to produce pricing. Our sign group, our traffic control, which is our traffic officers, and then we also have an engineering component. 3 different sections of our department, in our department alone. So throughout the day, they get emails, and each individual has to try to come up with the cost, and they look at this, how much they need to deploy, etc. This enables them at a bird's eye view to see where they're talking about, get a feel of the environment. We can also do satellite view too, so if there's any other issues on the map. And it's incumbent upon our department as well as all the other departments to get their costs in to Street Service by a certain date and time. Where are you now, Paul? Okay. All right, so he's bringing up the event that was just entered. Street Services goes in, they review it, they check certain things. Here's one, I guess, we have $1,000 for signage. Okay, there's certain departments that automatically get notified on every event. However, Street Service has the capability of adding other departments. The departments that are usually notified are obviously DOT, Fire Department, Police Department. But sometimes there's other departments that are brought into it. They have to do certain reviews or permits depending on the type of event. Street Services has the ability to select those and add them on here, so they're getting the same blast as everyone else. Okay? What Paul is doing is he's showing all they need from us, like our department will put in what the estimated cost is. When the event is over, obviously we go back and we look at what the total true cost was. However, it is important for all departments to be as close as they can to the cost, because I don't think anyone wants to be surprised after the event with a huge bill. Okay. In our case of our department, we have internally what we call a labor calculator, where it looks at, it's another system we use that pinpoints the job classification, what the indirects are, and also ours are pretty accurate. Other departments have different methodologies. So we put that information in, it goes back to Street Services as the event approaches, and they go to different steps. Why don't you, the system will also have the ability to send an invoice to the sponsor so that they know what the cost estimates are. All that'll be electronic as well. And this is a sample of what an invoice will look like. The system will automatically populate the invoice so that it can be sent electronically to whoever the sponsor is with the cost for the departments that have costs associated with it. Okay, so that's automatic. There are times when the cost will deviate. For example, there may be an event, it goes beyond hours, or the crowd is bigger than what it was thought. Sometimes there's additional costs associated with that. But every effort will be made to communicate that with the sponsor, and the department who produces those costs is on the hook for explaining why they have the additional costs. Okay. Another feature, as they move through different steps of it, as you can see on the status bar, even Street Services is seeing, Street Service and all the departments are actually seeing the same thing. So when the cost estimates are completed, boom, the invoice is administered, the user gets notified, everyone internally, throughout all the departments know. Then it goes to a point where is the event going to be approved or not, permit issued, and pretty much completed. So in a nutshell, those are the highlighted features of it. There's a lot of other features, but it's really something internally for the workflow that's done between all the departments. And with that, that concludes where we are with the special events. If you have any questions, I'm sure we can help you with answers.
So does the person get, for a block party, let's say, oftentimes they'll be less sophisticated than a big group. They get an estimate first of what it would cost before they sort of sign on the dotted line that they're going to pay for it, or how does that?
Yeah, the way it works currently is deployment of resources do not occur unless money has been delivered. Street Services collected money for it. There are special occasions where last-minute projects and so forth, there's some adjustments, but the idea is to make sure that the sponsor knows up front what the true costs are, or the estimated costs, and they can weigh whether or not they want to continue with the project. So it is something, it's an improvement over for a lot of them on what we're doing now.
Sure, that's much more real time. I know Mr. Bonnen's, your motion, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it, and thank you for all the work you've done on this. This is very impressive progress because while we've made progress in the past couple of years, we've still been for a long time at sort of carrier pigeon and carbon paper for a while and how this is done, and this is progress. I still think there's a few steps that might be missing, so I got a few questions. And let me explain why I introduced this motion with a couple specific examples. We have, as most council districts do, a ton of special events. We particularly have a lot in, say, Venice, where people do a lot of, 5Ks, 10Ks, triathlons, stuff like that down by the beach. And we tend to have a lot of events that recur every year. And they tend to have the same problems year after year, and in some ways the problems have gotten a little bit worse. We have every year in Pacific Palisades for 4th of July 3 separate different events, and in most cases they are waiting until the very last minute, like 2 days before the event, to get their estimate or their cost assessment. Hopefully this will do some stuff to nudge folks. But then the problem has been, they'll get the cost estimate at the last minute, 2 or 3 days before, and they'll be told, now you have to drive downtown with a check or with cash. You have to come to the counter only at City Hall by close of business, and if you don't do this tomorrow, well, you're not going to get this done before 4th of July. And that doesn't make sense for people anymore. I can pay my DWP bill online. I pay my parking tickets online. That's a separate issue for DOT. We'll talk about that one later. No. My campaign office, everybody got a parking ticket. And almost any service you can do. I can go to a neighborhood association, and their members can pay their dues with the little scan attachment you put on your iPad or even your iPhone. Canvassers outside of the supermarket can do that. I didn't hear anything mentioned here about online payments or credit card payments. What's up with that?
I'd be happy to answer that. Actually, the system, that is a component that we are going to be adding. We do that internally in our department. We convert it to online payment. And so we've shared that. We've had meetings with street services on how to do that. There's 2 ways. One is a person can go online, obviously, and pay. The second is we have shared with them some of the new type of technology we have where there are times when people are downtown and they're in the area and they want to pay. There's a different type of device where it can accept checks and credit cards. And also it has the ability of franking the checks on the spot. Because there are times some of the smaller sponsors, the monies may not really be available when they write the check. We have the ability to frank it. We do that now in our department, and we share that with them. That is another enhancement that will be part of the system when it's eventually launched. There are some additional programming we need to do, but it's not, the city does it throughout the city. I mean, that's a very easy thing for us to incorporate into this.
DOT is not the primary collector for this stuff. It's usually street services,
Correct.
right?
However, we do special. Our department does contract with the venues for special events. Okay, so Dodger Stadium, Greek Theater, and so forth. We do hundreds of events, and we do process payments electronically through our own internal methods. This branches all of it together.
But for these parades in the Palisades, for a block party in Mr. Blumenfield's district, because probably one of the only things worse than driving downtown from the west side would be driving from Mr. Blumenfield's district Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday around 9 a.m., I imagine. Will they be able, if it's a street services coordinated event, pay online?
Yes.
And when will that system be up and running?
No, it's part of this. This is, again, about 85% complete.
Right.
And that's the final element of developing this system, is the payment, the reporting components.
Okay, so there'll be, under status, there'll be a tab for paid?
Yeah, when the invoice, once they get the invoice,
Yeah.
it will give you, there's language we use where give you the payment options, okay?
Okay.
You can pay online, you can pay in person if there's particular locations, and it gives you that option. Not everyone is comfortable making payments online, so we want to make sure, we still make that available.
And before you go live with this, will you be beta testing this with residents, folks who do special events? This seems sort of intuitive to me, but I'm familiar with how we process. Is there going to be any testing with real live residents?
With real live residents? Well, the idea is before we launch, we do a blitz campaign, but once you go live, you really don't want to mix the current process with the new process. You want to implement it completely. So we'll do it similar to what other systems we do, where we go out and we show everybody how it works and so forth, and kind of have a. It's hard to do a soft launch on a special event.
There's some folks. There's a lot of events in the city that are annual every year. The triathlon is annual every year. These parades are annual every year. You could actually just invite them to come in to the office and see this and test it out and get some feedback.
Mm-hmm.
The other situation we have a lot of in my district is, for either triathlon or parades, you indicated how you could indicate sort of a block that would be closed. Is there an intuitive way for someone to mark a parade route or a race route where it may turn corners and go around and go all over the place?
Okay, with that I'm going to bring in our guru of technology. I'll let him introduce himself, but he's really part of the brains behind the logic. So.
Yes, Moni Patel, Los Angeles Department of Transportation, Business Solutions Group. If you notice when you go to the street closures, it's a GIS map, and the idea is that you can trace your route, and basically you can continue to build your route. So even though you don't have it in that one view, you can pan over and keep adding to the route, and it'll keep adding the blocks. So you'll see when he pulls it up, you can basically go back in and as you add, it keeps adding the blocks down at the bottom, and you can delete them as well if you make a mistake. So if you draw one, and you can turn a corner, and it will basically double click it, And see, it does a buffer, and so basically it says found every street within that. So if you did like an entire circular, it would capture all of the blocks around there. And again, you can delete them, zoom into the individual ones if you wanted to edit it. So it has all the editing tools to be able to create a route. Another thing that this allows you to do is the annual events that you talk about, all of this is saved. So if I'm a sponsor and I've created this event in the past, I can reuse that same route, and if it changed in one end or the other, I can just change those blocks and then resubmit so I don't have to redraw the whole thing again.
That's very cool. Now here's the second reason I did the motion is the question of interdepartmental coordination, which you guys speak to a lot. But one of the main agencies is LAPD and the First Amendment permitted stuff. And here's an example, because I wanted to give concrete examples. Is this past October in Westchester, LAPD permitted a First Amendment parade, and it turned out it was taking place in the same staging location as a Bureau of Street Services permitted charity 10K race, which takes place on an annual basis. It was a huge nightmare with folks sort of feuding. I actually had to have 2 or 3 deputies who were out there that day negotiating stuff. Maybe LAPD needs to speak to what their permitting process is and whether or not this will be integrated in this, and whether or not you'll know if there's a First Amendment permitted event.
Yeah, currently First Amendments are obviously handled by LAPD and approved by the Police Commission, and Street Services handles most of the others, and then DOT handles venues independently. There was a time when the Special Events Ordinance was first adopted that we also handled First Amendments, but then it got into an issue of we were collecting monies from them and went to court, and we can't do that anymore. There's the ability to layer stuff. We haven't had any discussion with LAPD because they run a separate thing, but we totally understand what you're saying. It goes beyond that, and that's where this is the basis for other things. When we have a special event, sometimes there's construction going on, and this gets into the pavement reservation system. Sometimes there's resurfacing going on the same date that events are going on. The whole intent is for all of us to work cooperatively with the same platform. We're using the same mapping system that BOE uses so that we start layering things so we know the conflicts and the things before people get too far ahead of the game. That's what this is. This is the beginning of that whole intercoordination.
But LAPD is not part of this yet.
No, they're not.
So we could have the same situation. You guys could be permitting something, they've paid for it, and lo and behold, we find out the night before there's a First Amendment permitted activity going down the same street?
I don't know. I don't
Generally, the Bureau of Engineering inputs the First Amendment marches in the PWRS system. So we get the permit applications from LAPD and input them into PWRS. And if, as someone said, that these systems integrate, then that should show up into the new special event permit system. So.
I'm going to recommend, too, as part of this motion, we amend it slightly so that we direct LAPD to coordinate with Bureau of Street Services and Department of Transportation to make sure that what they do is compatible with the application. Because we're hearing, yes, no, but I think the best way to proceed is it's clearly an issue, and let's make that part of our recommendation. And I'll restate it when we get to that point, but we'll to next.
And thank you for that. Then my last question would be about the timing of the estimates coming back, because sometimes that causes so much confusion because they don't get an estimate until 48 hours before, so they have to pay at the last minute. Is there a way to build into the system a mandate that the reviews by the various departments are done 2 weeks out or something like that? I mean, if they're going to get a tickler system, just build it in so that the tickle comes, so that they've got to do it sooner.
Yeah, that is a feature in the system. I didn't go elaborate on that, but that is a feature in there. However, we do know there's circumstances Street Services runs into where sometimes the events are still evolving. The sponsor wants it, and so there is some flexibility with Street Service on that. But the idea would be, for example, the system could have a timeline where if they plan out far enough, that timeline could be anything we set, but it could be 7 days before the event, your cost estimates have to be in, right? If a department does not submit its cost estimates, it's one of those situations where we need to create new policy. Either they're going to be in a situation where they have to either really explain why they don't have it, or they're pretty much pressed with absorbing the cost. And for some departments, that could be huge. But the idea is the onus is on each of us departments. We want to get out of Street Services being bill collectors, chasing down the money, because it is very time-consuming and demanding. And they can invest more of their energy and effort on, catering to the event. There is also the feature where Street Services, if they need to, if somebody calls them, a department calls them, they can put in the cost too. So it's not limited just to the department. If that individual's on vacation or they're out sick or they're just not available, there is another way to make sure cost estimates get in. And sometimes it can be as simple as looking at the event from the prior year, saying it should be in this range. But that is the goal, is to make sure we all are more accountable on getting information and helping out the end user.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Selwyn. So it's 85% ready. Do you have a ballpark time frame? Are we talking at the beginning of the next fiscal year or sooner that we feel this could be fully implemented?
Well, to fully implement, we always like to start things off at the beginning of a new fiscal year for monetary purposes, et cetera. What we're working on right now with Street Services is some final fine-tuning that they like that will make sure all their needs are met. And then we also have a contractor that we work with to help us with some of the GIS and certain components of it. Once we're in discussions with Street Service, we have a final punch list. Once they start building that, the reason why I say full implementation is we don't want to just turn on the lights the next day. We want to have an opportunity to make sure people are aware. Also, the participating departments are aware of their new roles and responsibility, make sure they're trained. We think we can pull all that off in the next 5 months.
And to tag along a little bit with the full payment piece. So the way it is designed now, the intent is to require full payment up front before any permits are issued. Is there imagined to be a system wherein there's a process for unanticipated costs. You alluded to that. So I think that maybe to consider a deposit that could be refundable or something to help cover unanticipated costs. That would have to be carefully considered because we certainly don't want to get in the business of, overcharging anyone or even the perception of doing so. But it is important because the city has been in the business in the past of going after collections that we've never captured well into probably the millions of dollars. I mean, in the case of what was once the Sunset Junction Street Festival in Silver Lake, we know that there are many hundreds of thousands of dollars that are unaccounted for, and we might just have to write those off. So that is a real serious fiscal matter. And then in terms of editing the routes, once something is decided, would that be pretty much locked down once the permit is issued and it's triggered, wherein perhaps only the sponsor could then come back to the departments and say, in the final analysis, we need to alter the route so that it could then be populated?
Right. That would be coordinated with street services directly because things do evolve and change. Weather conditions, you never know.
Right.
So there is some latitude on the street services where they can contact street services and work that out.
And then perhaps this whole thing could be tied into the early notification system, if that even still exists, but the notification system so that neighborhood councils, any interested city, activists across the city could kind of log in and be part of some notification system so that in advance of these events there would be an update or a bulletin about a particular special event that would have regional traffic consequences. That's something to consider to tie this in with. And then lastly, to our chair's point, I would definitely see the situation wherein the police commission would absolutely need to adopt a process wherein they don't issue any First Amendment permits until this system is reviewed. So I don't want to belabor that. I think that we're heading in the right direction there already.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question about the sort of playing off of something my colleague said about the openness of the data. So, we're moving toward open data and everything. How easy is it for someone who is not the sponsor or I forget the other terms, but one of the three groups to log in and see what's going on?
Anyone can. It's totally open. Because a lot of times you want to know what's going on in your neighborhood.
Right.
You don't want to apply for anything, but you're just curious. Maybe you want to take your family to an event.
Right. So you can log in, and when you do, as a third party, will you be able to see the price of the permits and all of those things, or are you just going to see what streets are taken off?
Right. That's interesting. We had that internal discussion because I know a lot of people are curious as to how much the city resources are costing. We were actually going to leave that as a policy issue for council to decide because there are times when certain special events are discounted. There's a council action to discount, the cost recovery of an event. Comes to mind something, I think one of the award shows, there's a cap. So we really don't recover our full costs. Marathons, we don't recover our full costs. So that's something we really need to think about because it doesn't reflect the true cost of events. However, the public would be able to see where the event is, the dates, the times. There's a calendar feature already built into the system. I mean, they can select the time of the year they want to look at. We have all that in there. We didn't go over a lot of the details, just wanted to highlight things for you. But if the cost is something, we can go back and maybe come up with a proposal on how that might be reflected. Or it can be as simple as what resources of the city are used. But when you get with cost, I mean, it is a sensitive issue to a lot of citizens. We hear a lot about that. We get a lot of inquiries that people pay for this or that. There's activities that our department provides resources for that are not part of this program, and we get those type of questions all the time.
Yeah, I guess it is a policy question. I mean, my instinct is always to err on the side of, more is better. Sunshine's good disinfectant, and get it out there is as difficult as it will be because there will be events that are discounted. But that is So what's the process for making that policy decision? I mean, is that something we have to direct, or is that something that, how is that moving forward?
Well, there's a number of ways we can do it. I think probably the best is for us to come up with some recommendations on how it might be reflected, and we can come back to this committee and prior to the implementation of this and see it. If it's something we put on there and we decide it's not something that you really want to do, we can always darken it, later on. But cost is, you even have the ability to run a ticker on how much special events are costing the city. It is a concern among a lot of citizens as to how much the city resources are dedicated to events in their communities. However, at the same time, a lot of council districts embrace, the different events and the cultural, events, and it's a celebration in a lot of respects. And how do you weigh the cost sometimes? People prefer it regardless of the cost. So I think we need to be very honest about.
And sometimes people need to know that things aren't free as well, because everybody expects us to do all these different things and assumes that that there is no cost.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a double-edged sword, but it is something that we should look into.
Okay.
And then I like the idea, you're saying some sort of push notification where if you want to sign up, if you're in a community, you say, I want to, every time there's an event within these square radius, I want to get an email. I imagine that's not that hard to set up, but maybe it is. What's that?
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah,
Basically, you could pick the council district, or you could pick citywide if you wanted to, and get email notifications. The system is flexible enough that feature could be added to it.
And where that comes from, Mr. Chair, is it's been well over 10 years ago. There was the early notification system established through the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, where anyone could basically subscribe to it and get the early notification. And it was designed so that the neighborhood councils back in the early formation period could become a conduit of information for the constituents that they serve on a volunteer basis. So not sure where that is, but the idea served a really great purpose, and I think something like this would fit right in with that objective.
And if you're a school or a church or a synagogue or whatever, you might want to know in advance if there's some public event that may conflict with your private event, so you would create a radius around your institution so that you get that early warning. That would make sense. Are there any other questions? So what I'd like to do is, suggest that we adopt the motion, we forward it to Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee, we direct Bureau of Street Services, Department of Transportation, and other departments as appropriate to provide a live demo to council when the system is complete or in the final testing phase. And we also, per our discussion, we direct the LAPD to work with BSS and DOT to see if their permitting process is compatible with the application being developed by DOT and BOE, and to report back to us if it's not, why not, and how do they move forward on that? Does that seem reasonable? If that's agreed, and without objection, that is so ordered. Thank you all very much. This was a great demonstration and a really exciting project from Mr. Bonnet.
That's a cool shot.
Yeah, and that's a cool picture.
That's his personal shot.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more item. Mr. Villanueva, would you read item number 3, please?
Item number 3 is a motion by Council Members Blumenfield, Fuentes, relative to a draft policy for the purchase, installation, and maintenance of electric vehicle charging station. We have no speaker cards for this item, sir.
Great. No speaker cards. We'll get the staff from GSD to come to the table to report on this.
I'm Marvin Moon, Director of Power System Engineering and the department's electric vehicle program manager.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Hellman. I'm with the Department of General Services, Fuel Services, and Environmental Compliance Division. Want to provide the background?
Yeah, I'll start off. The department is a strong believer in electric vehicle infrastructure. To that end, we've done a lot of retrofits in the city using largely grant money, we received from our smart grid initiatives. We started off with a goal originally of 117 chargers, and these are legacy chargers, and we've done to date 207, so we're well on our way. In addition to that, we've also installed three DC fast current chargers. These are the kind of chargers that can charge up a car in as little as 20 minutes. So these are very cutting-edge chargers. In addition to that, we've also launched rebate programs that our customers can take advantage of these charger opportunities. We have a program for residential chargers and for businesses as well. For businesses, we support workplace charging and public charging. These rebates are also available for city departments to take advantage of. On the third item, we are looking at the next wave of retrofits for the city as a whole, and we've been coordinating with other city departments for a big grant opportunity that's being offered by the California Energy Commission. The deadline for this submittal is the end of next week. So we've talked to LAWA and the police department, general services, LADOT, libraries, and the zoo. We have a list of their wish list. We're consolidating it for the submittal next week. We're very excited about that opportunity.
Excited that we're taking advantage of it.
I'm very excited that
with putting it together on the state side on the budget as it went through last year, and so I'd like to see it actually come to LA.
Yeah, same here.
Okay, as Mr. Moon mentioned, DWP has really taken the lead in terms of coordinating with departments and taking advantage of grant opportunities to get these chargers installed at various locations, both public and non-public throughout the city. GSD specifically worked with DWP to upgrade the chargers at City Hall and City Hall East. You may have seen them downstairs. With the installation of these chargers and the increased presence of electric vehicles, we've had chargers in City Hall for quite some time that we just didn't have the vehicles. Obviously now we've seen a proliferation of electric vehicles in the private market, and several policy issues and procedural issues have arisen that fall under the purview of various city entities. Some of these issues are responsibility and funding for ongoing maintenance and repair of the chargers, possible fees to the public and or employees for vehicle charging, time limits for charging, for allowing shared access to the charging stations, parking of non-electric vehicles and charging locations, potential liability issues arising from the use of these chargers on city property, and consistent policies across departments and facilities. In other words, if I go to a library, is it one thing? If I go to DWP, is it something else? GSD took notice of all these issues with the installation of the chargers at City Hall and City Hall East. We did a brief survey of other cities, a couple major entities and institutions to determine what sort of policies they were implementing. In short, to summarize, we did discover that most of the cities were basically in the same boat that we were. They had gone and they had applied for grant funding, installed the chargers with the policy determinations to come later. Everybody was competing for that grant money and eager to put their chargers up on the walls. It can be said at the time that we did perform the survey, most cities were offering free charging, with several exploring different fee models that would be proposed for implementation at a later date. A lot of the grant funding came free with a free warranty period, so there wasn't much need for funding up front to recoup costs through charging or various fees. We also found that the cities and institutions we looked at, they were also grappling with a lot of the policy issues that I mentioned earlier. GSD realized that many of these policy issues and determinations fell outside of GSD's authority, and that these determinations and policies would also, to the public, represent the face of the city in terms of their attitude towards this particular alternative fuel technology, as well as maybe the city's environmental stance more broadly. And that's where we find ourselves.
That's exactly the reason why this motion came forward is all of the issues that you mentioned are precisely the ones that generated the interest on my part in terms of how are we dealing with the maintenance, how are we dealing with the timeshare, and all these unresolved policy issues. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the maintenance problems. I thought that was a particularly interesting issue, is that we don't have really a clear line at the moment on who maintains them and how they get maintained. Is that right?
This is correct. They were installed. They have been up till recently, and I think most still are under warranty. Perhaps DWP can speak to that. So we have had some warranty support up to now that we've been able to rely on, but going forward, that's something that needs to be resolved.
Yeah, our approach has been with the installation that the maintenance and care of those units belongs to the facility that they're on. So that's the way we're at today.
The facility doesn't always share that viewpoint.
Well, most of the ones that we put them on have a right of entry, and that's in the agreement.
Okay. I guess I've heard from folks who say, well, it's not,
Okay.
it's not ours, it's theirs, it's DWP's, it's, everyone else. But that's
why we're here.
We don't need to relitigate all that. I mean, that's why we're here, is to have this motion. And I wanted to make a slight tweak to the motion as well, because, we're directing all the agencies to work together. But what I want to do is actually direct the CAO with the assistance of the CLA to add them in as sort of the folks to drive this, to work with the Department of General Services, Department of Water and Power, Department of Rec and Parks, Department of Transportation, Personnel Department, and any other departments as necessary to draft a city policy for the purchase, installation, and maintenance of electric vehicle charging stations. So that's a very minor tweak, but it puts the onus on, or onus is the wrong word, it gives them the opportunity, CAO and CLA, to help drive this a little bit more.
And Mr. Chair, if I may recommend, please include the planning department in terms of, I know that right now in my district I'm negotiating in 2 different neighborhoods a public-private share parking structures. And so that's just a suggestion.
That's great. Without objection, we'll include that in there as well. Are there any other questions on this item? We're all pretty much on the same page. We're on the same page. You guys would appreciate the work that you're doing on this, and we look forward to moving this forward and really getting into the meat of the policy once we come up with it. So.
But now that you've done this on the state and you're doing it on the city level, eventually we have to get you at the federal level so you can get it fully comprehensive.
There you go.
We welcome that discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. So without objection, the motion is adopted as amended, and I believe that concludes all of our items. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
I thought you were going to use the